It's hard to believe that I've known John Begley for 35 years and he's completing his 40th year of service to this college. He's been an incredible president in so many ways and a leader at this college. He's transformed this place.
It was like the difference between a still photograph and a colored moving picture. I mean, the change. There was the still photo with things static, just this way. You always saw them the same way. When you went back there, again, to no one's discredit, it's just the fact of the support at that time. And then John moved in, and it seemed like a colored film. Things started moving, and things took on color and life. And that was the impression I always had.
There is a difference at Lindsey Wilson College. It's a difference that's made us the fastest growing independent college in Kentucky for 6 years in a row. That's a tremendously big claim, but it's true. So we must be doing something right. I'm proud of Lindsey Wilson. I'm proud of our administration, our faculty, and most especially of our students.
All you have to do is look around and see the buildings that weren't here before his arrival. The Crammer Dining Center that we're in tonight, the Turner Building, the Crawley Student Union Building, Richardson Hall, Lilly Hall. I could go on and on and on listing differences that he's made just in the physical appearance of this campus. Probably the most dramatic impact, though, is that he created a vision for this place. He understood that this place needed to have a mission that he could communicate and sell others on his dreams for what he hoped to accomplish here. And quite honestly, he believed in this place when nobody else did.
I remember back in 1978, I guess it was, when we first started trying to put a college together and trying to sell the college to the community and to donors and to prospective students. And we had deficit budgets and we were struggling with finances in a pretty serious way. But I went out and purchased a brass rail and had it installed in the entranceway, the steps going up into the administration building. And I really thought that it may have been a serious mistake at first because no one seemed to understand why. But the primary purpose was to communicate to the faculty and to the staff and to the trustees and to our constituents that this is a symbol of what can happen at Lindsey Wilson College if we work hard and work smart, if we search for friends and funds and freshmen with aggression, we'll do well.
John Begley's always taught me that there's a price to pay for leadership. And he certainly paid that price. He was dictatorial about the mission and dictatorial about the dream. He didn't have time for faculty governance and consultative management. He couldn't be people's friends sometimes. He had to make tough decisions, and he's paid that price physically. When you think about having quadruple bypass, high blood pressure, stomach ulcers, sleep apnea, on and on and on. He's so much healthier today than when he left the presidency 20 years ago. Yeah. You know, it's so funny. When I arrived here in 1983, I was terrified of John Begley. If I saw him walking down the sidewalk, I would head the other direction because I didn't want to bump into him. But, and others, you know, many others had that same response. So it's so funny today to see this loving, sweet, grandfatherly figure who's so sweet and loving and warm. And he was loving then, but it was a tough love. I remember him saying, "You're lucky. your dress shirts coming out of the back of your pants. I mean, you've got to buy dress shirts with a longer tail on them. You know, he would talk to me about my tie. My ties were too short. You've got to buy long ties.
I hadn't thought much about what I was supposed to say, and I got to tell you, I was absolutely awful. I mean, I just completely bombed. And he was out in the crowd, and he made me a little nervous. And I saw him later, about 30 minutes after I had this presentation, and he said to me, first of all, I said, Doc, I said, I didn't do very well, did I? And he said, no. He said, Bill, I got to tell you, that may have been the worst speech that I've ever heard. But then he told me, he said, you need to know that I love you and that I care about you and that I believe in you. And don't ever forget that.
So even then, when I was nobody, he would go out of his way to help me get better. His vision, his dream for this college, the way he fought for it, the way he kept it alive during some very, very challenging, difficult times. I mean, we were a struggling 2-year college. Went from 2-year to 4-year to master's degree during his leadership there. But it was his vision for this college that not only made a difference here locally on this campus, but also impacted this region. I believe Lindsey Wilson College would not be here today were it not for the leadership and the commitment and the vision that John Begley had for Lindsey Wilson College and his capacity to help other people believe in his dream and his vision. But I love John Begley. He is like a father to me. He's been my mentor, my dear friend. Doc, I love you. And thank you for all that you mean to this college and to the Luckies.
I think one of the first things I said when I came here was, whatever you vividly imagine, ardently desire, sincerely believe, and enthusiastically work toward will inevitably come to pass. I've said that because I believe that. I've practiced that philosophy, and I've seen that come true time and time again.
Would you join me in offering a grateful welcome to our keynote speaker, Dr. John Begley. All right. Thank you. And thank all of you. You're looking at a blessed person. God has been so good to me. He's given me a chance to be a part of this great place. I get a lot of credit for things that have happened in my 20 years in presidency. And I hope that before this night is over, you will realize that it's got a lot to do with the fact that I knew when I came that Lindsey Wilson College had to have a strong faculty and staff. It needed a strong and generous board of trustees. It needed friends. It needed funds. And it needed freshmen. I knew how to do that. I thought I did. And it turned out I did. I couldn't have done it by myself. And I hope that you will sense even more at the end of this time together tonight than you do now, how important it was to face up to the reality of what we really needed. One of the things I hope I'm remembered for is bringing, or at least seeing potential in an admissions counselor we had in my early days. By the way, President Lucky has been at Lindsey almost as long as I have. I've been here 40 years. He's been here 35 years. Can you believe that? Pretty amazing. But at any rate, I saw potential in him as a young admissions counselor. And I finally promoted him to a director of enrollment management. And then vice president for development. And then vice president for administration. And then I stood back with great satisfaction when I saw the Lindsey Wilson College name, the Board of Trustees name him the 8th president of Lindsey Wilson College. That was one of the great moments of my entire administration when I saw that happen. Bill and Elise make a great president and first lady. And while I can look back and take great pride in some of the good things that happened during my 20 years, it is almost as satisfying to see what they've been able to do. Bill Lucky is a gifted president, and he has done a remarkable job taking Lindsey Wilson College to the next level. I thank God for what he has done. I'm a little bit overwhelmed by all of the attention I've gotten tonight, and I hope you will help me to understand, or at least I can help you to understand, that I didn't expect to get as emotional as I am, but I am emotional, and you just have to live with it because I can't. When I think about it, I was so pleased when he asked me if I would be the Founders Day speaker. I always wanted to be. I even wanted to be when I was president. And he finally was nice enough to invite me, and I'm glad to be here. But I'm placed in an uncomfortable situation. I'm probably the oldest person to ever speak at a Founders Day banquet. You're almost as old. But I'm pretty old. I remember one time when I invited someone almost as old as I am to speak at a homecoming banquet. It didn't turn out very well. I will never forget what happened. It was so many years ago that I can't remember the year. But it was before we had bigger sports center. And before we had this beautiful dining hall. We were having our meals in Hunley Hall. And we had all of our home basketball games at the Biggers at the Adair County High School gym. Our dinner that night was at 6 o'clock. The opening basketball game of the season was at 7:30. I introduced a speaker at 6:45. 40 minutes later, he was just getting warmed up. And so I leaned over and said to his wife, who was sitting next to me, I said, do you think he would mind if I told him that our ball game starts in 5 minutes? And she said, yes, I think he would mind. I thought she was saying, I think he's going to finish in time. He wasn't. He didn't. And when Lucretia and I got to the basketball game and to Adair County gym, it was halftime. You need to know that I have too much respect for President Lucky and for all of you than to take advantage of the situation. But you also need to know that I have 100 stories I'd love to tell. I will not do it, but I surely would love to. Maybe I can get invited back. Well, at any rate, my first time to be on the campus of Lindsey Wilson College was 47 years ago, and it was Founders Day. The year was 1971. The president, Dr. John Burns Horton, was the Founders Day speaker. His last few months in office were marked by turmoil, as some of you will remember. But to his credit, that night, he put all of that behind him and talked about the mission of Lindsey Wilson College. And here's what I remember that he was saying. He was saying that students who come to Lindsey Wilson College will forever live in a larger universe. I found myself getting emotional tonight when I listened to these two students speak. And I thought about Dr. Horton. And if I were to paraphrase what I heard the two of you saying was, for the most part, you were saying, we live in a larger universe because of Lindsey Wilson College. And then I got to thinking about all of you. We have, for the most part, everyone in this room is a donor. And the truth of the matter is, because of your gifts, and only because of your gifts, can students say that, because no college can provide the kind of help that students like ours need without donors. And you have to feel good when you sit down and write a check and send it to Lindsey Wilson College knowing that a Gabby Piles or a Patrick Atkins or someone very much like them will forever live in a larger universe because of your gift. That has to be one of the best investments of a person's gift dollars. I can't think of a better one than that. The mission of Lindsey Wilson College. I was working on the time situations today and for the last several weeks, and I kept thinking, what can I get by not saying? But the truth of the matter is, those of you who know me know that I have never given a speech without talking about the mission of Lindsey Wilson College. we have a mission statement. But we are a college that doesn't just have a mission statement, we practice what that mission tells us to do. And what our mission says is that we are to serve the educational needs of students, which sounds pretty generic. But what we mean by that is more than just academics. We are certainly, that's the most important thing we do. But we believe that our students have needs other than just academic, that they have social needs and cultural needs and physical needs and spiritual needs. And so what sets Lindsey Wilson College apart from other colleges and universities is that we want to serve the whole person. Serving the educational needs in an atmosphere of active caring, not just caring, active caring. We learned a long time ago that you can care for a student and the student will never know you care. But if you actively care for a student, you'll find a way to let the student know you care. Active caring, Christian concern. We even talk about a living learning environment because we know that living-learning environment means what happens outside the classroom is also important. What happens in this dining hall? What happens at an athletic event? And even for those commuting students, what happens when they get home? It's part of our mission to try to help our students learn and grow and feel like a real human being. That's our mission. And I apologize for the extra 4 minutes I just threw in. And the Lord told me to do it. I start thinking about 1978. You know, as great as your mission is, colleges still, from time to time, hit a wall. And Lindsey, on more than one occasion, has struggled financially. But no more so than it did in 1978, my first year. I was elected president at Founders Day. It's always been a big day in the life of this college. It was for me at least that day. 2 days later, I learned that the United Methodist Church has 120, or had 120, I don't know how many they have now. 120 colleges and universities. And then I learned that Lindsey was one of 7 that had just been identified as not likely to make it. When I arrived on campus several months later, I also learned that there were all kinds of issues that we faced that were almost life-threatening for us in the immediate future. We had a great faculty, mission-driven, loved the place, great teachers. They didn't have a retirement program. They didn't have health insurance. And the highest paid faculty member was making less than $10,000 a year. I could talk for a long time about how bad things were, but you got some sense of that when you saw the video. What I want to talk about is where we are now. A lot of great things happened during my administration, and I think we've done a pretty good job telling you about that tonight, but I want to talk about what's going on now. President Luckey has been president the same number of years that I was president. And he has taken this college to another level. I mean, we are 100 times better off today than we were when I came. I'm not sure I even said that as well as I could have said it. It could be much more than that. We are a different place. And when I say that, I realize that what I'm talking about is that we have so much going for us. We have a lot of new buildings that have been built since 1998. You mentioned those buildings, so I won't have to. I talk about the ones that you built. Pretty darn impressive. I mean, can you imagine the changes that have taken place on this campus over the last 40 years, but also even the last 20 years with the Jim and Helen Fugit Science Building, the Bob and Carol Gooden Nursing and Counseling Building, the Holloway Health and Fitness Center, the sports complex out on East 80, the 3 residence halls that have been built. I'm talking about within the last few years. And then I think about how the college has changed academically. We now have so strong academic programs that we are looked at with great admiration by even our peers in the higher education world. And all of that's been because President Luckey has placed his emphasis there, and it is paying off big time for us. What's ironic is that we've done so well that I sometimes get the impression that some people think, gosh, Lindsey doesn't need me anymore. And I want to speak to that. The more successful we become, the more dependent we will be on gift income. I don't think that will change. I don't even want to give you a hint that it might change. It hasn't changed at Harvard. It hasn't changed at Princeton. I don't know of any place where that's changed. And when you think about it, you'll understand why I say that. For instance, right now, Lindsey has 2,000 more students than it had in 1978. Our budget in 1978 was $600,000 a year. This afternoon, the Board of Trustees at Lindsey approved a budget of $60 million. Can you imagine that? We had a $600,000 endowment fund. Today, our endowment fund is $27 million. But because our budget has changed so much, we changed our goal and set a goal of $100 million and know that it ought to be $200 million. The Board of Trustees approved that recommendation by President Luckey. And one of these days, there are people in this room who will be at Founders Day when it is announced that Lindsey now has a $100 million endowment. I believe that. But in the meantime, make no mistake about it, we need your support as much now as we did in 1978. But there's more. I might say this. At this point in time, I was thinking about where'd I go from here? And I found myself thinking about what it was like when I was a child. I grew up in the home of my grandmother. Two sisters. My sister Renee is sitting right here in front of me. We grew up in Mercer County, Kentucky. We lived with our grandparents, and my grandmother was a devout Christian. She believed that anytime the church door was open, we should be there. And it wasn't optional. I mean, it wasn't something it'd be nice if you all go with me. We knew we were to be there. Now, I'm talking about Wednesday night. I'm talking about Sunday morning. I'm talking about Sunday night. I'm talking about the 2 revivals we had every year. Some of them a week and some of them 2 weeks. It was different than it is now. I got thinking about those revivals, and I remember how the evangelist would always preach his heart out, and then if you saw him raise his hand, you knew what he was getting ready to do. And he would say, and now with every head bowed, and every eye closed, and no one looking around, and then he would start to give his invitation. I thought about that. I thought, wonder what I could do along that. And you'll be pleased to know that the more I thought of it, the more I thought, oh, that's not what I can do. All I need to do is to thank you for what you're doing. And to encourage you to continue doing what you've been doing. And believe that God will bless you for what you're doing. And He will. I can promise you that. And because God blesses you, you on your own will look for a way to do even more for Lindsey Wilson College. I believe that is exactly what will happen at Lindsey Wilson College in the days that are ahead. I was tempted to recognize an awful lot of people tonight. I wanted to. Better judgment tells me I shouldn't. But if I had time, and I don't, I really don't. I don't have time. You may, but I don't. Something tells me that there are in this room, when I said I had 100 stories to tell, I meant that. Because when I look out here and look at each table, I see someone I know. And each table reminds me of a story that's worthy of sharing. There's so many of you that I wish I had time to tell you personally from this lectern how much I love you and how much I appreciate what you have done and what you are doing and what you will continue to do for Lindsey Wilson College. What I want you to know is that this college is great not because of its presidents, and I say presidents. It is great because we have been blessed by people like you. And I'm talking about faculty, I'm talking about staff, I'm talking about trustees, I'm talking about donors. And I want you to know that John and Lucretia Begley love you, that God loves you, and that all of these precious students at Lindsey Wilson College, they know about you because we tell them about you, and they love you. God bless you for giving me an opportunity to be here tonight and to share my story and my love for you. God bless you.